It's the second to last day in paradise as Michigan is gearing up to face Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl. We talked to Sherrone Moore and Kalen DeBoer today. We got some interesting things that we heard from that. We're going to talk about it here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Hopefully the technical difficulty was that I had my microphone on correctly initially, and it fell down my shirt. And I can't see the screen, so I can't really see that it fell down my shirt. I didn't feel it fall down my shirt, hence the muffling. So my apologies. Anyhow, we're back and doing it. And Michigan plays Alabama tomorrow at noon at Raymond James Stadium, Tampa, Florida. But nonetheless, to me, the more interesting things that came out of today, very little out of the actual press conference. And honestly, outside of the fact that we didn't do shows over the weekend, part of it was just, being out and about and all of that. But there also wasn't really anything particularly like, hey, we really need to hone in on this thing. That kind of changed a little bit today because there's a little bit more stuff to discuss. And it's kind of rare, bowl game, that there's not a lot to discuss. But there really was just very little coming out of some of these things here. We will go back in segment 3 and talk a little bit about Wink Martindale and some of the players talking about Ohio State and all of that. But let's first kind of key in on some of the more interesting things that came out of today. Sherrone Moore mostly after his press conference, and we had a little bit of a scrum, just 6 minutes. And he was asked about Bryce Underwood. He's asked about Mikey Keene. He's asked about Chip Lindsey. And I thought that there was a lot of really interesting things that came out of that. So let's start with Chip Lindsey, even though I know you probably want Bryce Underwood. There wasn't a ton there. But I think with Chip Lindsey, I think the thing that should make you feel better if you are a Michigan fan, because I know a lot of Michigan fans are a little bit underwhelmed. I've tried to talk you out of that. I've tried to tell you that, hey, maybe this is something you should pay a little bit more attention to and think the best of, because he's got the type of track record that Joe Braddock had really hoped for. Again, I've cautioned you against Jason Candle, and I know a lot of people were on board with that. I can't really understand why personally, but then I shared with you that Candle is not the biggest Underwood fan. Talked to my source again on that, and he confirmed that once again. So I think Michigan ended up with kind of the right guy, especially with a guy that could do a lot of stuff. Has shown that he can have a 3,000-yard passer and 3,000-yard rushing attack as well, which is exactly the type of thing you want. And that was exactly what Sherrone talked about when he talked about Chip Lindsey. Is he's a guy that can do the balance, can do similar things to the things that we want. But I thought the thing that really stood out to me was he talked about how he himself had a call with Drake May. And that Drake May said that he felt that Chip Lindsey was the one who got him to the point where he could be a top 5 overall pick. I know we all kind of looked at that and say, like, well, Drake May was going to be a top 5 overall pick regardless of the circumstance, right? He was already a ballyhooed quarterback. But Drake May himself said, I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for Chip Lindsey. That's an important distinction to understand and make. And I think that when you hear that, that's like, okay, cool. On top of it, you've got Bryce Underwood, who signed off on it in part because of that, right? Because everyone's talking to Drake May and all that. I don't know if Bryce did, but Bryce felt like, hey, this is the guy that's going to help me become the best version of myself as well. It's more important that is the consensus, that the people inside the building have that consensus, not you, the fan. Now, obviously, you, the fan, should want it, but it's kind of, I liken it to the times that I remember the Detroit Lions drafting players. And you're sitting there watching. It's like the drafts that ended up being bad in hindsight were the ones where they didn't take the guy that I wanted them to take. The ones that ended up being absolutely awful in hindsight were the ones where they took the guy I wanted them to take. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many times that I've seen the Lions or any football thing. You sit there and watch the draft, or you watch them make these moves, and they're the ones that's like, oh man, that's the perfect pick. That's the perfect coach to go there. And then it doesn't work out. It doesn't always have to be sexy. It just has to be productive. And I think that's what Chip Lindsey is. And I think with what Michigan has, there's absolutely a lot that can be worked out with that. I'll be interested to see how things go in the bowl game with the offensive line, because we're going to finally get a chance to see Andrew Sprague. And Evan Link is going to be moving to the left side. Andrew Sprague is going to be starting at right tackle. It's not an ideal scenario, of course, but at least it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're going to get to see a little bit of who's going to be able to be up front, because that's going to be the important part of the Chip Lindsey experience, is who's going to be able to be those guys who are up front, able to do what you hope that they can do. So I can't wait to kind of see how that goes as far as that's concerned. Let's add Mikey Keene into this mix. We'll talk about Bryce Underwood on the other side of the break here. But Mikey Keene, the more I've talked to people close to Michigan, the more that I've heard, like, yeah, this is the guys that they really wanted, right? This is who they had honed in on. And I understand Wink Martindale had his comment that made everybody kind of take a step back. He didn't mean broke man's Kyler Murray when he called Mikey Keene the broke man's Kyler Murray. He meant poor man's, right? So everyone reads that as like, yeah, he's trash. Of course the coach isn't going to be like, yeah, no, he's trash. It's just Wink being Wink, and all of that. So I think you should look forward to it. And that's one of those things with Bryce. He wanted someone that was going to be able to come in and provide good competition. I think Mikey Keene, when they talk about him, Sherrone talked about him and said, like, yeah, the Chip Lindsey connection helped, but he's just got everything that we were kind of looking for. And you have to also understand you needed to be able to have a guy that was willing to come in and compete with Bryce, because getting to see, I would say, about 40-ish minutes of watching Bryce and the other quarterbacks. I mean, he is very obviously, with the current roster, the best guy there. It's very obvious watching him. And I think that's it's important for him to crave the competition, and also have a guy that likewise craves the competition, isn't afraid to come in, understands that there's a strong possibility he can lose his job to Bryce Underwood, and still decide that, okay, this is the right move for me to make, and that he comes in and makes that exact move and comes to Ann Arbor. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that all works. I mean, the floor has certainly been significantly risen in the room. And you almost feel a little bad for Davis Warren, who's been a starter, beat Ohio State, all that kind of stuff. And he's most certainly going to be relegated to being the third quarterback on the roster. But we'll see. They're going to have these competitions. Davis is going to have an opportunity. Jaden Davis is going to have an opportunity. All of these things. Sometimes guys can come from out of nowhere and start to provide some things. And I'll be curious to see how that goes. With that in mind, I hope we do get to see a little bit of Jaden Davis tomorrow. Definitely releasing a lot higher. It's not necessarily square, but it's not sidearm the way it was this time last year. I mean, it really was sidearm this time last year. Now it's a little bit more like, if you're watching on video, you get a little better of an idea of the angle, but it's not a full square throwing motion. But it's a heck of a lot better than it was before, so that's a very solid. Let's talk about Bryce Underwood. We'll do that here in just a moment. But before we do, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that definitely has happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. I've used that quite a bit, actually, especially once I started trying to get my mortgage. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Just trying to wait for this plane to pass. We're basically right under the airport. That's the media hotel. Right under the takeoff. Nonetheless, again, apologies we didn't get to any shows. It was just, like I said, out and about, and by the time it's like getting in, you're exhausted and everything like that. Not a lot of noteworthy things coming out of this bowl week, which is interesting to some degree. I mean, obviously we were spending a lot of time talking about Bryce Underwood, who again looked amazing, and reading some of the comments, whether on Twitter or on the podcast from the last show on Friday. A lot of people sitting there thinking, like, well, what do you expect guys to say about X, Y, and Z? And I got to tell you, it's not that they're just saying it. You can see the types of things that people are saying about Bryce. You can see with your own eyes that he's the best quarterback that Michigan currently has on its roster, and it's really not very particularly close. He's got an amazing release. It's nice, fast. He's pinpoint precise. I didn't see a single off-target pass that he attempted. It was just absolutely beautiful to watch him go through and do everything. They had some progressions and stuff like that they were throwing him. Again, though, he's not actually going up against an actual live defense, so take that as you will. But certainly as far as the mechanics and the ability, you can see it's all right there. You could even, I think, see a little bit of some consternation from the other quarterbacks. More frustration in their play, but not in terms of, being on the same field with Bryce. This is where I think that you can look at it and say, like, okay, things are in a good spot, that he really is the Michigan type of guy, because you do see him, like you hear Davis Warren say things about how he fits in so well with the team, and people say, well, what do you expect him to say? Some of these things are proffered, right? They're not necessarily like, hey, how does he fit in with the team? Well, I think he fits in good with the team. These are things that were proffered. These are not, the questions are more of, what have you seen from him? And yeah, you got to give him something, but you at the same time, you can watch him work out with all the other quarterbacks, and you see him work, they're just kind of fitting in. He's laughing with them, and he's definitely a part of the room, and it looks like he's more a part of the team, has been a part of the team for some time. So that's exactly what you're hoping for at this early stage, and it's exciting to think that you're going to have all this time for him to continuously gel with the team. And it's also just almost, I was looking at one of the pictures I took. It's kind of almost mind-blowing to just see that Underwood on the back of the jersey and recognize, oh, he's here. That's actually happening. But I didn't get anything that was absolutely insane from Sherrone, which is why we kind of pushed this to segment 2. Didn't really feel like, okay, we really need to hit what Sherrone's comments on Bryce Underwood straight out the gates. If I can get the quote to pull up here. This is what Sherrone said about Bryce. He said, I think for me the biggest thing is I just want to get the best players possible. When you get a kid that's right down the road, it's going to make a big, huge emphasis to keep the best players in Michigan. And when you get the best player in the country right down the road, it's vital for us to go get that guy. So I want to do that every year, keep those players in Michigan, not let them go to these different schools. That was a huge emphasis to me. And then talking more actually about who he is, he said, first of all, he's an unbelievable kid. Players absolutely adore him. They love him. And all he wants to do is get better and be a great teammate. But he is extremely talented. He has great arm strength. He can make all the throws. He can run. He's going to be an unbelievable player. When that is, I don't know, but we'll figure that out. Absolutely jibes with a lot of different things that I had heard about him for some time. I do want to see if I can find I think there was a quote that I somehow missed. See if I can find that while I'm still talking. But that jibes with everything that Connor had said about him. I read you some of those quotes some time ago. But it's also the private conversations that I had with Connor about how much he loves football, that how much Bryce craves football. He's a hard worker. He's not that type of guy that you would look at and say, yeah, well, of course he's he's a number 1 overall recruit, and he's not coming in with an ego. It's just absolutely evident that he's not. So I think that's really crucial for a player of his caliber, that he understands, I am at the bottom and I need to earn my way up to the top. So I do think that is that's going to be the case, and that he's going to continue to be a humble kind of servant of Michigan football. So here's one of the things that I did miss this part. This is from Aaron McMahon, who is somewhere behind me, maybe in shot, maybe not. But he points out that Sherrone Moore says, a big thing for when we were recruiting Bryce, he was like, who's going to push me and who's going to make me better? That's so crucial, right? Who's going to push me? He's coming in understanding, I don't know everything there is to know. I am not the be-all, end-all. He's aware of his talent, sure. There's a reason. Anyone at his point would be aware of his capabilities and his talent. But the fact that he's able to have that mindset now, as he's getting this giant payday, to be a 17-year-old and get that type of payday. I think about when I was 17 and I was going off to college, I got $400. I think I spent it all at Hot Topic, to be honest. So it's a different deal for someone, when you're that young and you're getting that kind of money, and that we just have never seen that in college football until the last couple of years. When I say that kind of money, I mean that kind of money, right? Like the bagman stuff wasn't that type of money. It was good money, probably more than a lot of us make in a given year, but it wasn't like I can retire off of this if I invest my money correctly. Now I can live off of this for the rest of my life type of money, like Bryce is getting. So for him to have that mentality, for Sherrone to see it, again, to bring back to a Connor thing, I'll ask forgiveness for this instead of permission. I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this part. But Connor had told me about how, hey, when I left Michigan, J.J. McCarthy was here. In most ways, Bryce is already there. Talking about a lot of the just a lot of the things that he was able to do from a physical standpoint. Like Sherrone says, he can make all the throws. Obviously, the mental's got to be a part of it, and that's where we don't know where he's at, right? He hasn't been in games, he hasn't had all that, so they've got to be able to get him the football knowledge. Can he recognize what the defense is ahead of him? Can he rearrange the deck, chairs, or whatever? Not on the Titanic, but just in general. Can you rearrange everything in front of him to make sure he has the best possible protections and all of that kind of stuff? So that's where I think things will be interesting. But as far as the physical talent, he's already at where junior J.J. McCarthy, who won a national championship, he's already there. So that's really, really unbelievable to think about, that they already have a guy of that type of talent in the room. And it'll be interesting to see how, Mikey Keene's going to be able to bring a lot more of the, hey, I recognize what I'm looking at. I can change the protections. I can, read a defense. Yeah, he's throwing some interceptions and people are going to make mistakes and everything like that. I wouldn't blame Mikey Keene for the pick six from Will Johnson, because Will Johnson was baiting him into that throw. He made that same type of play, that same throw, and it ended up going for a big gain. So you win some, you lose some against top guys like that. But nonetheless, I think that that's one of the things that gets missed a lot when it comes to quarterback play. You watch the game and you see the throws and all of that. That's just one component. So I'll be interested to see how Bryce Underwood grows into that role and how much better he gets over the time. But wish we could see him tomorrow. Well, we won't. I mean, we'll see him in person, I'm sure, but not in the game. But it'll be a last opportunity for Davis Warren to ball out. Let's talk a little bit about the game, a couple things that Wink Martindale said, and we'll move on. But we will do that here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, I'm not wearing it right now, but you've heard me talk a lot about my favorite college apparel company. I've got more from this company than anyone else. That's Homefield Apparel. You've seen me wearing tons of Homefield stuff on the shows, whether it's the Michigan gear. I've got stuff from other schools. They had a subscription where they would just send you stuff, and I made a lot of people mad when I'd wear Georgia shirts, so whatever. But if you want to really stand out at your tailgate amongst your friends and all of that, the best thing you can do is go to Homefield Apparel and check out their retro modern Michigan gear. Homefield is based out of Indianapolis, and they spend all this time scouring all of the old and cool and amazing designs that you might not remember. Sometimes they modernize it, sometimes they just bring it to you back the way that it used to be. It's officially licensed. They've got so many cool things. They got these new quarter zips, they got the coaches jackets, they got the bomber jackets, they've got just the regular old t-shirts, they've got the hoodies. Like most of their clothes, the hoodies, the joggers, the most comfortable things I've ever worn. But you've seen me wearing the bomber jacket. Everyone always asks, where did I get that national championship bomber jacket? It's from Homefield. So go to homefieldapparel.com. Use my promo code GOBLUE24, homefieldapparel.com, promo code GOBLUE24 to get 15% off of your first order. Homefield Apparel, just the coolest college gear anywhere. All right, I regret to inform you, this is our last show of 2024. There will be no Tuesday show because I've changed my schedule a bit. The plan was going to be a late night show. When I say late night, I kind of meant like, hey, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., something like that. That's not happening now because I changed my flight. I'm flying out of Tampa instead of going and spending some time in Orlando. That's going to actually bode well for the rest of the week and the podcast, because that means I'll be back in the home setup, and it's just so much easier to produce these shows when I'm back in my home setup than being on the road. But no show tomorrow. There will not be time whatsoever between being at the game, having to rush to the airport, get on a flight, and get back home. Get home around midnight. So that's an FYI to you. We'll talk about the game on Wednesday, but just giving you the forewarning. We will be out and about. Wink Martindale. Can't go without discussing the one thing that I think is really interesting with what Wink said, outside of the Mikey Keene of it all. Talking about Ohio State, is he was not surprised by anything he saw. He said, he was asked, like, were you surprised by anything you saw? He said, no. Wasn't surprised. And he was asked more about Ohio State, and he says, we just physically outplayed them, which is true. And that just goes to show that the roles have really, truly reversed in this rivalry in every way. You got Nick Saban out there saying that Ohio State fans need therapy. I've talked to some high-end Michigan people this week, names that you 100% would know, who are still giddy and laughing about having beaten Ohio State. They've gone as far to say exactly what I said, like, that's hilarious. There's a lot to like about that. But here's the thing that I really got to say stands out. Not being surprised by anything that they threw at you is an indictment on Ryan Day and Ohio State. Because that means Michigan was fully prepared for them. And the fact that they still got out-muscled, outclassed, out-physicaled. It just shows you that Ohio State, as much as they're trying to change, to look like try to look like, hey, we're going to do Michigan, but we're going to do it better, that they're still not there. And that shows you that Michigan's mentality is still right in terms of, like, the style. Because styles make fights, and Michigan's style clearly is one that Ohio State can't seem to get over. So at some point, that'll change, right? That's just how it goes. But as for now, it hasn't. So that's excellent news for the Wolverines. So that said, what do I think is going to happen in the game on Tuesday against Alabama? Got to at least get in at least a small preview here. I don't think it's going to go very well for Michigan. They're just missing way too many guys. And as much as I want to sit here and say, like, well, next man up, and they say, hey, we run the same offense and same defense regardless of who's out there. And there's still some guys, right? Like, at least you still have the entire back end that played against Ohio State. But you are missing Mason and Kenneth. Now, Rayshawn Benny is right up there in terms of his ability, at least is what he's shown this year. But we're going to find out with Rayshawn Benny and Trey Pierce and Ike Iwunnah and Etta, are they going to be able to have the rotation? Are they going to be able to do some of these things? I don't know. We'll see. Defensively, Michigan stands a much better chance. Like, you might not necessarily be seeing, like, the full-on blowout experience, but that's where, when you look on the other side of the ball, it just becomes that much more difficult, because basically you're without all of your top guys, all of them. Miles Hinton, not there. Both running backs, Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards, not there. And I should recant, because I said you have your whole back end. You won't have Makari Page. He's not here on the defensive side. But offensively, like, you don't have Colston Loveland. You don't have the two running backs. You don't have Miles Hinton. You don't have Tyler Morris. There's a lot to try to figure out there now, and you're trying to figure out your offensive line while you're going up against Alabama. And I understand this isn't Alabama even of last year, but this is still a very good Alabama team. So if there's a path, it's just everyone playing over their heads. And Sherrone did at least say one thing today that piqued my interest. Is kind of like, we've got some certain things prepared that we haven't seen, but it's like, where you also don't go crazy and play outside yourself. You hope that maybe Alabama's defense does not, you see them and you're like, okay, this isn't that scary compared to seeing Ohio State or Oregon or some of these others, and that, you were able to kind of rise above some of these other defenses like Texas that they played, because it certainly, it might have looked bad against Ohio State offensively, 13 points and all, but that also might be like, okay, that defense is better than Texas and they've really grown. Granted, again, you at least had some pieces, you at least had your two running backs, and they don't. So if I was to give a score prediction, I'd kind of put it in the 28-10 place. I think Michigan will find a way to at least get in the end zone once. It's going to be hard, man. There's just not a lot of obvious answers as far as the types of guys that are going to be rolling out there. So that's what it is. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a happy New Year. Enjoy the game before you get to New Year's Day. We'll be back on Wednesday, hopefully early before so we can all spend time sitting and watching football. But we'll try to get that to you as soon as we possibly can. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.